Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. One of the very first things we ever teach our students in atmospheric sciences and meteorology are about the semi-permanent high-pressure systems and low-pressure systems. What you've got here is a climatology, a composite map of all days since 1948 looking at sea level pressure. And what we're looking at here is differences from climatological average, which is about 113.25 millibars. You start to see a few features, like right in through here, what we call the Aleutian Island low. We also have the Icelandic low, which typically sits off the tip of Greenland out over Iceland. You have your subtropical highs, like this one. Sometimes we call it the Bermuda high, but it's the big, large subtropical high that sits out here in the Atlantic. We have another one here just north of Hawaii that sits in this region. Take note of this area as well. This is really where we really watch for a lot of change when there's an El Nino versus a La Nina. Typically, there's a lot of rising motion here. It's a part of what we call the Walker circulation, where there's rising motion over by Indonesia, the islands in through here in northern Australia, and sinking motion over by like Peru here in South America. I could just keep going across the whole planet identifying these things. You know, it's kind of fun. Like, look at the Indian monsoon, plus the higher than average pressure in the subtropics in the middle of Russia, or even down here. See the very, very low pressure that's just off of the coast of Antarctica? That is why some of the strongest winds on the face of the Earth orbit around the Antarctic. You know, it just reminds me of that book. I just read a book about Ernest Shackleton in his voyages through the Antarctic, and just looking at this pressure gradient just reminds me how miserable that whole thing must have been. But that's besides the point. The point I'd like to make about all of this is what has changed in the forecast has a lot to do with these semi-permanent high and low pressure systems, and this is the point I'd like to make. You know, and we've been talking about this a while, we still have a La Nina going. Okay, this La Nina is possibly going to influence our hurricane season. This La Nina is influencing the position and strength of the jet stream. And this La Nina, as of late, has had some very strong trade winds in this area. The warmest water in the Pacific has been north of Hawaii, and that's really helped the pattern build into ridges here, troughs over the west coast, and ridges in the midsection of the country. But there's been a couple of very defining features about this pattern that are different from historical La Ninas, all the ones we've had in the past. Let me show you what I mean. I put together June, July, and August for our moderate to strong La Nina events since 1950. So you can see them all listed out down here. They're actually not in any particular order. What typically happens, though, is that we have high pressure over the Aleutian. See how that would be different from what's normal? We have high pressure here and a big ridge, and then downstream of it, troughing that happens right here along the west coast of North America. That tends to produce more frequent ridges in the midsection of the United States, and the jet stream just tends to stay farther and farther north because downstream of it, there tends to be higher pressure somewhere in and around the Hudson Bay, north of it, maybe even east of it here, but there tends to be higher atmospheric pressure and higher heights. The cause for the lower pressure here is largely due to historically having more tropical systems earlier, and due to the heat that comes in through here, we also tend to just have lower atmospheric pressure as well. But you know that we've been using this narrative as our guidance as to what summer could possibly hold. But this is what we've seen so far in the month of June. A couple of things make sense, like the troughs we've had just off of the coast. But if you notice, there's two important things about this pattern that's really set us up for June that have come kind of tumbling down as of late. One, instead of having a deep area of low pressure over the Aleutian Islands, we've had a ridge of high pressure, so the flow at times has kind of gotten bunched up and blocked here. Then the flow came around the trough of low pressure just off the coast, came into the northwest, and then rolled over the top of this ridge, which has been sitting somewhere between, Texas and the Mid-South much of June. But take note of this right here and keep this stuffed away in the back of your mind. Instead of having maybe a Hudson low, we've had very high pressure here. And this is typical of La Nina, to see that. But we're going to ask, is that still the case? And if it's changed, what does it do to the whole pattern? Okay, so keep that in the back of your mind. Because the pattern I just showed you here gave us this. This is month-to-date average temperature ranks by climate district. You can tell where the ridging has been. It's been in the midsection of the country. That's where we've seen the heat, much above average temperatures here, especially down into Texas, Louisiana. I mean, Louisiana just took a beating with temperatures the other day. whereas the Pacific Northwest, up until about right now, has not seen more than a day or two in a row with temperatures above normal. In fact, many of these locations are sitting in the bottom third in terms of temperatures, meaning they've been quite cold. That's what the temperatures have looked like. Here's what the precipitation has looked like. We've seen regional drought development in the Corn Belt, the Central Corn Belt especially. Some pockets right in here have been very, very dry. In the southeast, in the lower Mississippi River Valley, and in Texas. A very active southwest monsoon, but we've continued to bring in much above average precipitation into the Pacific Northwest. That's what that pattern got us to at this point. Now, in addition to that, just want to show you another variable here. Where all the cloud cover's been, like in the Pacific Northwest, throughout the monsoonal area right down here, and then in parts of Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec, these are areas that we've seen a massive reduction compared to normal in cumulative downward solar flux. That's how much sunlight gets through the clouds down to the surface. So the excessive amount of clouds, for example, in the Pacific Northwest, have robbed the area of somewhere between 3,000 and 6,000 watts per meter squared. We can roughly think of that as like not having good sunshine for about 3 straight days. That's the deficit that's been built up there in the Pacific Northwest during a time period like June when they normally have a lot of sunshine. And just to make the story complete, we showed this last week, but that drought monitor, because of the ridging in the midsection of the country, we've seen drought develop throughout the Mississippi River Basin into the southeast around the Tennessee Valley. And those were areas that we were concerned about the drought going. Okay, our La Niña is still there. We've already seen this ocean temperature map, but I want to show you something. The trade winds right now are very strong. We look at these diagrams a lot, right? Today, all the way through July 11th, this is exactly what I'd expect the trade winds to look like, how strong they are in these blue-green colors. I mean, it's right here that they're parked. That's the way I'd expect them to look in January. I mean, so this is certainly, La Niña still has a pretty tight grip on the flow pattern. And as we've been talking about, since May, it has just sucked the momentum out of the atmosphere. And we've lost it in the northern hemisphere, especially in the Pacific. So that whole storyline hasn't necessarily changed. What's changed is on the upstream side of all of this. And no, last week, I'll be honest, I don't think that I really gave enough attention to it in the models to add some good meteorological analysis to what the models were saying. And what I'm talking about is one of those semi-permanent high and low pressure areas right here between the Hudson Bay and Greenland. Now watch what I'm talking about. Blow this up so you can see it. What you're seeing here, troughs in blue, ridges in red, and we're looking here at the change in geopotential height with time. That's basically the thickness of the atmosphere through this weekend. Now here's what I took note of over the weekend watching the models change. This is still here. There's still a trough off the west coast. There's still ridging near the Aleutian Islands. That's been there for now the whole month. So this part of the pattern stays the same. But the ridge is backed up west. And that's because downstream of all of this, instead of having high pressure in this area, which is what we've seen most of June, that's completely broken down. So that gives us northwest flow in this direction. The subtropical high that can sit in through here is pushing this way. And it's going to change the precipitation pattern for a lot of very productive farm ground in this area. Another way to look at this, just look at the jet stream level winds. This is right now. See the depth of this trough? That was part of the trough that last week delivered the rain to the Golden Triangle, built in the big storms that hit northern plains and like Minnesota last Friday. Well over 200 reports of severe weather. This is the pattern that delivered all of the rain into Iowa and Illinois, which was desperately needed. And this was not well forecast 2-3 weeks ago. So when we see the new forecast keeping lower pressure through this weekend and into early next week right here, it tells us that the pattern's still having a ridge there, a trough off the west coast, now a ridge in this area, that this particular pattern will likely increase thunderstorm activity for some places that desperately need it. Not everybody, but some places that desperately need it. So now we no longer have the big ridge here keeping the jet stream farther to the north. And this is just what happens. I mean, I told you last week I had very low confidence in any forecast at the end of last week because of these troubles initializing the models, and now we're seeing the manifestation of that. This is what the shifts look like. Okay, so why this is important. This is what the last 2 weeks of precipitation anomalies have looked like. And if you see what I see, there's a lot of red on this map, especially from Texas through the Mid-South into the Eastern Corn Belt. There are pockets throughout the Southeast, as well as New England, that have missed out on precip. Look at Michigan in through here. And then throughout the Western Corn Belt and the Central Plains, excuse me, some very dry conditions. So what we're asking here is, does kind of the new thing that the atmosphere has kind of revealed to us happening over the Hudson Bay correct more of this? Because we already got a taste of it over the weekend. Now this is showing 7 days worth of precipitation, but a lot of what we've had up here and then this swath right in through here occurred on Saturday. Well, Friday here and then Saturday. The southwest monsoon has actually helped clip some storms into the panhandle of Texas, which desperately needs it. And heavy rains have moved through Kansas during harvest time here. Notice the white areas where we've missed the precipitation. Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, parts of western Kentucky, Tennessee, Indiana, big misses in through here, Ohio, and Michigan. And that's not to say, look at all the holes down here in the southeast. You see, I'm trying to see if this new pattern shift is going to be corrective in some of these areas. So let's get the big idea down first. Over the next 7 days, this is the map showing precipitation anomalies. What's not changed is the low pressure track is still through the Canadian prairie. We have weaker fronts that are going to come through here, and you've heard me say that now for 3 weeks. We got the southwest monsoon going and better moisture here, and this could be absolutely godsend for some people right here. This is a potential moisture plume from a tropical system. The trade winds keep pushing into the southeast, helping the drought situation there. And even though you see a drier swath in through this area, take a look at the new week 2 forecast. We see this corridor right in through here of above average precipitation. Same thing for parts of the southeast. And if that's the case and better moisture is delivered there, that would be huge for this crop going toward pollination, especially in the heart of the Corn Belt. My areas of concern come back to some places we've talked a lot about, the Mid-South. And you saw earlier in this presentation that the Mid-South, there are some pockets down here that have gotten very, very dry as of late and need quite a bit more moisture. So what I'd like to show you next is the brand new European weeklies. Now we're going to look here at a 30-day sliding window. So this would be the 27th of June to the 27th of July. And as I move it forward, we're just adding 1 day on the end and subtracting 1 at the beginning. Now what we see here in this forecast is going through the month of July, the models have really improved the rainfall through this part of the Corn Belt. They've kept this part of the Mid-South and down into Texas and the plains dry. Active southwest monsoon. There will likely be an active Canadian storm track, but look at how wet things are forecast to be here. There's a lot going on here. A lot of it has to do with that subtropical Bermuda high pushing in the trade winds, running it into weaker front boundaries and increasing the precipitation chances there. But I was not surprised to see that as we keep stretching this out into the beginning of August and going forward, I don't know, let's just take it out here to, there we go. How about July 11th through August 11th? Did you see how the models then went back over drier for the mid part of the United States? Wet here and wet in the southwest monsoon. What it seems that the model's responding to is the fact that in the near term, those trade winds are strong. It makes the La Niña look like it's in control, and as a result, the model goes over drier again in the midsection of the country. That is also where it puts in the warmest temperatures. This is now the July 11th through August 11th temperature anomaly forecast. And you say, Eric, why does it keep doing that? Well, if La Niña is the dominant signal, this is what history would tell us. This is July, August, and September, when I look at all those La Niña events right here, where they put wetter conditions, East Coast, saw that, southwest monsoon, and dry, right here in the midsection of the United States. So that is one of the big reasons why we're seeing the warmer forecast there and the drier. So what this tells me is while there's some temporary relief, complements of the Hudson Bay, we are going to possibly see the reemergence of drier conditions in the midsection of the country later. What would make that wrong? What would make this all wrong is take the trough off the west coast, move it west. Take the Hudson low, deepen it. You do those two things, this forecast will not verify. There'll be plenty of rain in the midsection of the country, and that will be, that would be fantastic for a lot of growers. The other wild card with all of this is actually in the tropics. I'm going to show you the tropics real quick. We got pretty strong trade winds right now. We've got 3 disturbances we're keeping an eye on. There's one right here, there's one right here, and one right there. Those are called African easterly waves. Now, the reason why we call them waves is they're a low pressure wave like this. It's not like a ocean wave, it's a wind wave, if you will. They're all orbiting around. See the subtropical high we pointed out at the beginning? There it is. That is technically the Bermuda high, even though Bermuda is here. So it's pretty far out into the Central Pacific, or Atlantic Ocean, excuse me. So these trades are really screaming around it like this. And they're going to do 2 things. On the northern side, the trades are going to come in and likely hit more often than not stationary boundaries along the East Coast. That's the better rainfall chances. But it's going to take these next 2 systems and guide them quickly to the west. National Hurricane Center has been talking about this, of course. In fact, today they upgraded the front system here to now become potential tropical cyclone 2. The one on the backside's got a 20% chance of developing, and the one right here off of Louisiana has got a 20% chance of developing. Let's take a look, though, at where they're going. European model takes the lead wave here and sends it right into Central America. Last week I was like, what if it gets into the Caribbean and then maybe into the Gulf? That's not happening. There's no longer this situation. We do need to watch the system behind it, because that one may go over the Lesser Antilles, the Greater Antilles, and come up toward Florida. That could be a potential path for that one. But the most immediate one we need to discuss is right here. This low, you'll see it in a few moments, might make a turn and hit eastern Texas, delivering quite a bit of heavy rainfall. Some of that moisture would come up in the mid-south as well, which would be desperately needed for those areas. So we need to see where that's going here in the near term. First, quick glance at our all hazards weather map. What we're seeing here, these are flood watches, got a few air quality advisories out. And then if you come over here to the west, this is all heat advisory. First time in the Northwest I've seen heat advisories this year. In the near term, let's go take a look at the high-res NAM. We're going to start this off at 4 o'clock, right about the time I'm recording this. We have our sagging frontal boundary here from the system that several days ago lit up the northern plains with severe weather. That's where the low is now. Thankfully, this front is not producing widespread severe weather, but locally some heavy rains coming through. And I want you to pay attention to a couple of things. We do see here going into tomorrow morning, let's pause it right here around mid-morning, there's another low that went pretty far to the north. It's actually off the image, but it's dragging a front right in through this area. And you're going to start to see a shift in the direction that the storms are coming in the southeast. And this is our possible tropical cyclone. So as we play this forward into Tuesday afternoon and evening, storms pop here in the southeast. The front advances through Wisconsin and Michigan and Ontario, bringing in storms into that area. And then what you're going to notice is, going into the overnight hours and then into Wednesday morning, 2 things. See where the tropical system is. It's about to make a turn north. Maybe I should redraw that. It's sitting here, and it's going to make a pretty hard turn north. And here's our next Canadian low. Remember, that low pressure track is in Canada, and that one sweeps through, creating storms across the northern tier as well. So where do we finish by Wednesday? Active convection over the southeast. The monsoon's still going. We've had 2 systems roll through the Canadian prairie. So from there, let's talk about the GFS and the European, because we talked about how poorly they were performing compared to normal. Well, there's been a bit of stabilization in that. And as I show you the next 2 animations here, which would be the GFS on the left and the European on the right, watch these 2 things. Canadian storm track, weak fronts, trade winds. Ready? So this goes from Monday into Tuesday morning, afternoon, evening. There's overnight getting into Wednesday morning, afternoon, and evening. We've already seen up to this point. So from here on, this is now Thursday morning. The European model has the tropical system here. The GFS does as well. It also has the next weak system rolling out of Manitoba into Ontario. So there's 2 things going on. There's a frontal boundary linking up with the monsoon and the moisture surge coming into this part of Texas. Scattered storms over the southeast. So going from Thursday to Friday morning, Friday afternoon, and evening, you see the lows are in the same spot almost over the Hudson Bay. That's a part of the Hudson low. There's a front coming out like this, coming across the Corn Belt. It is in both models. The Europeans more aggressive on the rainfall left over from the tropical system, bringing it right here into eastern Texas, which could desperately use this precipitation, and more scattered convection over the southeast. So that's through this Friday, going forward into Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, and evening. That front just sags and stalls there. See that? It's really well resolved in the European. It's maybe less so in the GFS, but it is there. Scattered storms over the southeast. Still going with that Canadian storm track right on into the weekend. See the next one coming in right there? That's Sunday afternoon. Stalled front to the south. I feel like a broken record, but that's the pattern we're in right now. So when you see all of that and you kind of stitch that together, you get the sense that I showed you earlier here of that being your next 7 days of total accumulated precip. Now going out there to day 10, you still have the lower heights. See the trough there? With the trough off the coast. So there's not much overall that's changed. So what do we end up getting when you have northwest flow? The week 2 precipitation pattern looks quite favorable for a large part of the U.S. I go right back to where I'm most worried about developing drought. So if the tropical system comes in, that relieves an area in through here. But the surrounding areas, we're just going to have to keep a very close eye on for continued drought development. You can thank the Hudson low, though, for the changes everywhere else. Okay, temperatures. I did want to show you the latest GDD map from April 1st. Now, I know a lot of us, especially in the Midwest, planted way after April 1st, but this is just kind of a gauge on what our temperature patterns have given us so far. We've recovered a lot of the heat in the Midwest as of late. Texas is still on pace for a very hot year, and the Northwest just can't buy an extended time period of above normal temperatures. I mean, take a look here. This was the highs we saw on Monday today. Watch how quickly that heat, which was in the Northwest, moves into the northern plains by Wednesday. 103 degrees in Nebraska, triple digits in South Dakota, and that just keeps moving. Comes over the eastern Great Lakes, or excuse me, the Great Lakes by Thursday, and just continues to press east by Friday. Going into your 4th of July weekend, there's Saturday's temperatures compared to normal, and Sunday, which is July the 3rd here. So you notice that by the time we get to the 4th of July weekend, we're not really seeing strong anomalies one way or the other. The coolest, though, would be right here along the west coast once again. And that's what we just keep seeing on repeat. Take a look. 5-day sliding window of temperatures. Going through this next week, through the 4th of July. Let's get out there to the 6th, 7th, and 8th of July. That's what the temperature pattern looks like. Now, you're not going to be surprised that as I go toward mid-July, watch the heat build in the Midwest, out of Texas, straight up through the plains, such that by the time we get out there to the 12th of July, the pattern's right back down to what it was doing all along. That is why we just continue to worry about this area missing out at some point on the rain and the ridge rider, setting up here on that northwest flow. That kind of completes that story. Last couple things I want to show you. Let's go here. This is the CPC's risk map for hazardous temperatures. So now we start to see that July 5th through July 11th where the heat is building back into the system as the troughs dip in the west, the ridge builds over Montana, and then dives into New England. So they've identified that as well. And finally, and very briefly, I want to just keep you updated on what's going on across Europe. There is, of course, a heat wave there. We can see the heat in Central Europe getting into Ukraine, parts of Belarus and Russia, and also down in Romania. And that is also the area that under the heat we're expecting to be dry. So again, Romania, through parts of Ukraine, Poland, Belarus, and Russia. Very hot and very dry coming up. Where it's stormy is in France and Germany, and then points to the north of it. That's on the trough side of that big omega block that's hitting this area. And also, just for completeness, I would like to show you some other parts of the northern hemisphere, specifically China. Models continue to be aggressive on the rains in the North China Plain, which is here, and the Manchurian Plain, which is there, but dry along the Yangtze River. And this is the Shandong province, which is very important agriculturally. So we're seeing some very dry conditions there. Okay, that was a lot to cover today. Appreciate your extra attention. I'll talk to you again on Thursday. Thank you.